Legal cases, legal issues, legal matters. You're watching WFTV's Law Talk with anchor Christopher Heath and expert legal analyst, attorney Mark NeJame.
All right, let's talk about some of the current cases, issues, and legal matters that our viewers are talking about right now. Joining me today is legal analyst attorney Mark NeJame of the NeJame Law Firm. Pasha Tagdiri is an employment part over there at NeJame Law in the civil litigation side, and employment is what we're talking about. Right. So many people here in Central Florida work an hourly job, and they may not know exactly what their rights are, what their classification is, but it's very important because, you know, that's how they're making their living.
That's right. When we see a lot of employees being taken advantage of, and it's oftentimes simply the ignorance of the law. Is somebody exempt from being paid overtime? Is somebody non-exempt? Are the employers attempting to show that they're independent contractors when in fact they're employees who are entitled to overtime wages? And so we find these issues, and there are significant remedies under the law for those employers who are violating the overtime law and statutes and not properly taking care of their employees.
And Pasha, this is one of those areas, and Mark touched on it, employees may not know. You know, if you're working your job, you've got a family, you've got things you're doing, you may not have time to pour through the law and find out what's out there, but it's important to know. And if something kind of, as an employee, doesn't feel right, ask, find out, am I being, you know, is my employer skirting the law here?
Yeah, and that is correct. So the Fair Labor Standards Act, the FLSA, was enacted by Congress in the 1930s, and that deals with, it's pretty much a rule book for employers that they have to follow, whether it's minimum wage, overtime, child labor laws. So there's, like Mark touched upon, there's exempt versus non-exempt. Most of your typical employees, they're non-exempt. They work hourly shifts, usually 40 hours a week, but anything over 40 hours, the employer has to pay them time and a half. And a lot of times employers don't want to pay that time and a half wage because it's more money out of their pocket. So they try to skirt the law a little bit. Like they would maybe put someone, their title as assistant manager, but they don't have any managerial duties. So if that happens and you're in that situation, you're probably entitled to overtime, and you need to speak with an attorney to see if you have a case that they should be paying you overtime when they're maybe trying to pay you a salary.
And this could be one of those things too where, you know, maybe I like my employer, I like who I work for, I don't want to get them in trouble, but it's at the same time, the law is the law. You are entitled to be paid for your time. You may love your boss, you may love where you work, but at the end of the day, if you're owed money for your services, you need to be paid.
You may love your boss, but your boss also loves saving money by taking advantage of your labor. And there are all additional remedies that if you're concerned that you're going to get fired or there's going to be an issue, employers cannot be retaliatory. So there's a whole other area that goes into that. But yeah, many times people simply, you know, believe that they're getting, you know, it's fair, but you're entitled to that money. The law says you're entitled to that money. And in fact, there's discussions about a lower work week, not a greater work week in America. So the fact is that if you believe you're being taken advantage, and in fact you are being taken advantage, you have remedies under the law, and you need to speak up on that, because not only that, you might think that you can't afford an attorney. Well, if you prevail, there's also provisions about the employer paying for your attorney's fees and such. So you've got full protection under the law. It's very much sensitive and aware of employee rights.
And Pasha, I know you've done this for a long time. This has to be one of those things where if it's happening to one employee, it's probably happening to a lot. So it's not just going to be you by yourself getting your hours manipulated. There's probably 10, 15, 20, depending on the size of the company.
Yes, exactly. And that's something that I've learned, that a lot of these employers that have been doing this, they've been doing it for a long time. And employees need to know that, like Mark said, they can't be retaliated against. If you're still at your job, they can't fire you. If they fire you, they got a whole other legal issue in retaliation on their hands. So yes,
Is it often too an issue of employers being ignorant of the law, depending on the size of the company? They may not have a good legal department, they just do it, but then again, I guess ignorance of the law is no justification,
It's no justification, right? and it's not a defense. If you owe your employee overtime, then you're supposed to pay your employee overtime. You know, what employers can do is they can go ahead and comply with the law. After they take care of their employees, then they can go ahead and they may be, okay, now you're going to work 40 instead of 50 or 45, or they pay the overtime. But the fact is they can't retaliate, as Pasha just said, and fire you. Then they've got a whole new bucket of worms they've got to deal with.
Yeah, and then again, it's one of those things where you may not know the law, Ask, find out. If something doesn't feel right, if you feel like you're suddenly being told you have to do things that don't quite seem right with the job you signed up for, ask.
And that's why we're here, right, Chris?
That's
why we're here,
that's
to
why.
educate the public about these matters.
All right, Pasha, thank you so much. Mark, NeJame, thank you as always. If you want to watch more of this Law Talk or any of our other segments, visit our website at wftv.com/legal or join us each week right here on Facebook. I'm Christopher Heath, and thanks for watching.
WFTV's Law Talk was brought courtesy of the Personal Injury and Accident Division of NeJame Law.